At midnight on June 5th, 1944, 150,000 men were awake, not all of them by choice. In the sealed marshalling camps of southern England, soldiers lay in their bunks and stared at the darkness above them. In the holds of transport ships rocking at anchor off the Hampshire coast, men played cards by the light of electric torches. In the cockpits of aircraft crossing the English Channel at altitude, pilots checked instruments they had checked 100 times and watched the fuel gauges and said nothing. And in the concrete bunkers above the beaches of Normandy, German soldiers on night watch looked out at a sea that gave nothing away. What happened in the final hours before June 6, 1944 was not one story. It was 150,000 separate stories, each one private, each one ordinary in its own way, and each one ending at the same place. The camps had been sealed for nearly 2 weeks. No passes, no outgoing mail, no telephone calls that were not monitored. The men inside them had been briefed on their objectives in meticulous detail. Plaster-scale models of the beaches, aerial photographs taken days earlier, printed lists of road junctions, seawall heights, and strong point coordinates. They had been given French francs and French phrase books. They had been told what to do if they were captured, and what to do if the man beside them went down. They had been told almost everything except how to get through the night. Men responded to it in ways that revealed more about them than any service record. Some wrote letters that postal officers sealed and held for delivery after the operation. Others sharpened knives that were already sharp or broke down and reassembled weapons they had cleaned twice that day. Card games started at camp tables with no real interest in the outcome. Chaplains holding evening services found lines outside their tents longer than anything they had seen in England. Men who had not prayed seriously in years knelt in the damp grass without embarrassment and without irony. Some slept. Veterans and first-timers alike would later express surprise at this. The body, when given no other option, makes its own arrangements. Eisenhower's message to the assembled forces had been distributed that day, beginning with the words, "You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade." It had been read aloud in some units and posted on notice boards in others. Soldiers who had developed a practiced skepticism toward official language read this one differently, not because it was more eloquent than other addresses, though some found it so, but because the words matched exactly what was true. Something unprecedented was beginning. What almost no soldier knew that night was what Eisenhower himself had done after leaving the airfields. After visiting the paratroopers of the 101st Airborne at Greenham Common on the evening of June 5th, watching the aircraft lift off until the sky was empty again, the Supreme Commander returned to his headquarters and drafted a message to be released in the event of failure. In it, he took complete personal responsibility for the decision to attack, stated that the troops, the Air Forces, and the Navy had done everything that bravery and duty could ask, and concluded that if any fault attached to the attempt, it was his alone. He folded the note and placed it in his wallet. He said nothing about it to anyone that night. The men in the camps did not know this paper existed. They did not know that the man who had sent them was also, in his own private hours, preparing a statement for the catastrophe he feared might be coming. There is a loneliness in that act that the official histories have difficulty measuring. Across the channel, a different signal was being sent. On the evening of June 5th, the BBC broadcast a series of coded messages to the French resistance on its French service. Among them were lines from a Paul Verlaine poem that resistance networks had been instructed to listen for. The second half of the message confirmed what the first had promised 2 weeks earlier. The invasion was beginning. In farmhouses and barns across occupied France, men and women who had waited 4 years for this moment gathered around hidden radio sets and began preparing for sabotage operations against German rail lines, communications cables, and road junctions. They would be working through the night. Most of them would not survive the war to see what those nights had helped build. By 10 in the evening, the paratroopers had begun to board. Across the airfields of Wiltshire, Berkshire, and Oxfordshire, soldiers of the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions and Britain's 6th Airborne Division filed toward the aircraft and gliders that would carry them across the Channel. They wore camouflage on their faces and carried more weight than a man could comfortably run with. They were already, in the dark of the airfield, a different category of person from the ones who had been eating in the mess hall 2 hours before. The transformation was not theatrical. It was simply what happened when the waiting ended and the actual thing began. At 12:16 on the morning of June 6th, the first Allied soldiers touched French soil. Gliders of the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, led by Major John Howard, landed within meters of their objectives in Operation Dead Stick and seized the Caen Canal Bridge at Bénouville in a night assault lasting less than 15 minutes. The bridge held. The men who would storm the beaches at dawn did not yet know this had happened. They were still in the Channel, in the dark, inside the sound of their own engines. On those ships and landing craft, the infantry waited in their own particular way. The flat-bottomed boats moved through water still unsettled from the storm that had delayed the invasion by 24 hours. Men were seasick. Men slept in shallow intervals with their equipment still strapped on. Some looked at photographs they carried in their breast pockets and returned them carefully to the same place. Some opened K-rations without tasting what was inside. The shore they were moving toward remained invisible in the dark, and the only indication of what lay ahead came from the drone of aircraft overhead, hundreds of bombers heading east in formation. And then, as the horizon ahead began to lighten, the deep rolling percussion of the naval guns opening fire. What they could not see from the water, and would not fully understand until much later, was the scale of what surrounded them. Nearly 5,000 ships were crossing the Channel that night. 11,000 aircraft were in the air. The operation involved troops from the United States, Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, France, Poland, Norway, and a dozen other nations. Men were making the crossing in languages that would not have been heard together in any other context in human history. The word liberation meant something different in each of them, and the same thing in all of them. 150,000 men went to sleep, or did not sleep, on the night of June 5th, 1944. They ate or did not eat. They prayed or did not pray. They said things to the men beside them that they had not said before, or they said nothing, which carried its own kind of meaning. Some of them wrote letters that arrived at houses in Ohio and Ontario and Yorkshire weeks after the people who sent them were already buried in France. Each of them had a last night. Each of those last nights belonged to a person with a name, with a specific face, with a set of things they were planning to do when it was over. The scale of what happened on June 6, 1944 can be measured in divisions and coastlines and the arithmetic of casualties. The weight of it can only be measured one person at a time. The ramps dropped at dawn, and 150,000 private stories became one.